Because one of the things that I'm focused on personally, personal growth, is the truth. If you could summarize what we should expect in 2024 for the world, if you can give it one word, what would it be?
Chaos, yeah. I think the USA in general, in particular, is a chaotic country.
I don't think people in America are as tribalized as you would suspect.
Wow, man, this is huge.
Welcome to the SOSCAST on Valuetainment. I'm your host, Adam Sosnick, and today we're doing a one-on-one with my friend Zuby. No ladies, no other people on the panel, just Zuby and I. If you're not familiar with Zuby, I consider him a thought leader. Sometimes you might agree, you might disagree. I think the things you say are very thoughtful, and I think you're leading in that regard. But regardless, author, speaker, rapper, coach, the one and only Zuby in
Adam,
the house.
So good to see you.
If I could reach you, I would.
No doubt, man. All good, bro.
Zuby, one of the reasons I was excited to have this interview today is because one of the things that I'm focused on personal growth is the truth. Finding out the truth, or as they say in Latin, veritas. Well, it used to be, that used to mean something at Harvard.
Yeah.
But finding out the truth. You saw the World Economic Forum, the number one thing on their list in the upcoming years is misinformation and disinformation. Mm-hmm. So there's this conversation about misinformation, disinformation. We're all familiar with facts, don't care about your feelings. We know about this. Everyone's got opinions. And the latest thing is my truth. Well, living my truth. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've talked about this before. But listen, we're just solving for the truth. So there's a lot of chaos in the world. There's a lot of different opinions, a lot of things going on. But I need your help, Zuby, kind of covering the truth of what's going on there, because I trust your judgment. First question. It seems like an easy question, but you might have to be a little pensive for a second and think about this. If you could summarize what we should expect in 2024 for the world, if you can give it one word, what would it be?
For the whole world?
For the world?
Same.
The same?
More of the same.
Huh.
More of the same, yeah.
Really? Because, the one word that Patrick and I, that he constantly says is expect chaos.
Chaos, yeah.
Expect chaos is here. So the opposite of chaos is order. Mm-hmm. So you're almost saying same, is that more chaotic or is that same of order?
Man, I think it's the sum of the same. I mean, the word chaos is an interesting one. I'm kind of hesitant to say chaos because I guess it depends on what your frame of reference is and what you're comparing to. Mm-hmm. So if I look at the course of human history and I look at moments of genuine chaos, then any potential chaos that's happening now or that I foresee in 2024 pales in comparison to it. Mm-hmm. So I'd be hesitant to use the word chaos to describe it. I think the USA in general, in particular, is a chaotic country. I think it probably has been since its inception. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest country in the Western world, biggest population, probably the most diverse country in the entire world. If you're thinking of all the different things that you could view as diversity, you've got, they say 330 million people, probably closer to 400 million people, increasing every single day legally.
Talking about the
legally or illegally, yeah.
Running in like it's captured flag back
exactly.
in elementary school.
Seems to be hundreds of thousands of people per month.
70 million people you just put out there. That's a bold number. I've heard 10, I've heard 12.
Yeah.
You're saying it's closer to 400 million?
Man, I don't know. I would not be surprised if the U.S. population is closer to 400 million than 330. I think 330 is around what they say. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 400.
That is people who acknowledge, yes, I'm living in the United States. I'm a citizen of the United States. There's a lot of people that are basically saying, yeah, look over there for a second.
Yeah, it's a big number. So the reason why I say the same is, man, things change, but they also largely stay the same. There's nothing new under the sun. I think from year to year, once in a while you get these black swan events where things go, super weird and take a turn for whatever reason. But for the most part, I think the easiest way you can predict what's going to happen in any given year is to look at the previous one or the previous couple and think, okay, there's going to be random things we can't predict. but it's going to be kind of similar. I wouldn't use the word chaos because to me the word chaos would signify, there's going to be some new sort of huge global event or some type of civil war or something like that, or just something real chaotic. I don't foresee that happening. I could be wrong, but most likely I'll be right in that regard. Things don't tend to be as bad as we tend to think that they are. And I think some of the reason for that is because times are actually so good now. Again, if you look around the world, if you have a global perspective and a historical perspective, things are actually incredibly good for humanity right now. There are massive things to be concerned about, and there are issues and there are worries, but compared to stuff our ancestors dealt with, it all really pales in comparison.
Yeah, I fully agree. People want to say how bad we are
in
times today.
Yeah.
When you look at the crises around the world, a lot of it is just sort of geopolitical man-made stuff. Like we've lifted how many people out of poverty in the last 50
billions,
right.
Billions in our lifetime. Yeah. Billions in our lifetime. I mean, if you think...
access to sanitation, access to water,
absolutely.
Access to having more money. You could probably expound upon that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't, man, I wish I had this statistic, but I saw this number about, it was about China, and it was saying how many people per day were being lifted out of abject poverty in China over the last 50 or so years. Right. And it's some astronomical number per day, right? So if you just went back like 40, 50 years ago, China was considered a poor country. And now it's this economic powerhouse, which is, having double-digit economic growth per year. Like no one used to even be concerned about China. It was Japan everyone used to be worried about, right? People exactly. People thought, Japan exactly. Now it's like, oh, China is rising, and India is now most populous country in the world. A lot of people probably right now in the modern West in particular, if they think of India, they're just like, oh, you're just poor country. That's kind of it.
You're spot on, Zuby. Is that a lot of people think, oh, we're the sign of the times, or we're falling apart.
Yeah,
it's the end of times, everything with that. But if you actually take a look at the numbers, whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's African countries, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's in that side of the world, whether it's in Latin America, abject poverty as of 50 years ago. And each day, each year, people are being lifted out of poverty. It's not as bad as people make it out to be.
No, not at all, man. I mean, you have to think, even in developed countries, even in countries like the UK and USA, if you went back to the 1800s, which is not that long ago at all, most people used to be poor. You kind of just had the peasant class.
Yeah, of course.
The concept of a middle class is new. It's under a century old, really. Before that, it was like you have the aristocracy and like the truly, truly wealthy people, like sort of that class, and then you just have peasants.
You have the royalty and you have the serfs.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. And then in the 1900s, this whole idea of a middle class became a thing, and it's now a thing in every country where you have people who, you're not at the tip top of royalty and aristocracy, you're not at the bottom in abject squalor, and you're somewhere in the middle, lower, middle, upper, and you're doing well. You can have a house or at least somewhere to live. You can generally have a family. You've got a job. You're getting by. You've got enough food to eat. You probably have too much food to eat. And so, as much as we focus on, I think just due to the nature of what we do, being in the world of media, podcasting, intersection of politics, society, culture, all these things, you tend to really see the problems and spend a lot of time talking about the problems and the issues. This is going on with men and women, or the culture war, or the political battle, this election. And sometimes you have to zoom out a little. I think it's really important to be aware of this stuff, and there's many things that need solutions. There's some real genuine problems that are out there. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's like, actually, we're doing pretty well as a species. What we need to really be careful of, and I think maybe this is why people are so sensitive to all this stuff, is it's like, we need to not screw it up. I think that's where a lot of people are concerned. It's like, hey, actually, it's taken hundreds, thousands of years to get to this point, and we've got this thing right. Cool. Like, dude, most of human history for thousands of years, like, slavery was just normal for thousands of years. Exactly. Like, people being genocided and, raiding bands and wars and battles, like, not in small pockets around the world like it is now, but but just pervasive, right? I think that's why it was such a it was just a normal thing, right?
Caliphate, the Vikings.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on and on.
Do you know something that's interesting to do is to just look at historical maps and see again, because in some way the map in terms of like the land masses, technically it changes extremely slowly, but it stays the same. But where the borders of nations and empires are completely changes. I mean, even in my own lifetime, I think when I was born in the 80s, I think there were about 170 countries. I think now there's 196. So 26 new countries have come into existence in my own lifetime. So even if you think, okay, 25 years from now, 40 years from now, the borders are actually going to be different. You might have some nations that come together and become a single nation. You'll have other ones that split off. It's not going to look the same. Empires rise, empires fall, or Greek Empire, Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, like all of these things. It all just changes. And it's hard to, some things you can somewhat foresee, but it's also impossible to predict with any real degree of accuracy. But it's interesting, and I think it's very fascinating. I think a lot about the fact that we're in the first quarter of a new century, and I like to think, okay, in the year 2100, what's the world going to look like, and what's going to happen in that meantime? And that can be both exciting and it can also be scary. I would imagine that the people who are young men and women who were, let's say you were 20 years old or 15 years old in the year 1900, and someone were to tell you what was going to happen in the next 50 years, you'd be like, what? Come on, man. There's not going to just be one world war. Right. There's going to be two of them. And you're going to have like these crazy dictators, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and you're going to have communism and Nazism and fascism, and it's all going to be going on, and you're going to have millions of people fighting and millions of people dying and this and that. Like, I'd imagine in 1900s, they were like, oh, like we're pretty civilized. Like, we've got stuff.
Right. Literally, the 20th century is the bloodiest century in human history.
Exactly. So I freaking pray that what are we? We're 21st century, yeah? I pray that this century is not going to be like that, but history is still happening. History is a funny word, because when you think of history, obviously it refers to the past, but I think that people at any time tend to think that history is kind of done, and you forget that you're living in the history of the future, right? So in the year 2100, they're going to be looking back, in 2024, this happened, and in 2030, this happened, and so on. So yeah, I hope and I pray, and I genuinely do believe that it's not going to be as brutal or violent or whatever. I think that a lot of lessons have been learned in that time, and I think even some of the changes in technology have made it far less likely that you're going to have those type of wars. I would imagine that if there were another sort of war in the West, or even some type of world war, that it would be fought very differently. It wouldn't be, recruiting millions, hundreds of millions of young men to go out and fight and die.
The days of those fighting, World War I, in the depths of the pits of the
the trenches,
trench warfare.
I think
done with now. It's cyber, it's bio, it's
which could be scarier. Like, I don't know. Again, I hope we don't get there, but I'm generally optimistic. I think I'm always long-term bullish on humanity. In the short term, I might be like, the next 5 years, I'm not really sure if the trajectory is good. But I think if I look back at the world, I don't know, I wasn't around, but in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, so on, like over the course of centuries, we tend to improve and get better. You have corrections and recessions in terms of the human trajectory. But I always remain optimistic about our nations, but also the world and species as a whole.
Yeah, so, one of the things we say here, valuetainment, is that only the paranoid survive, but at the same time, the future looks bright.
Yeah, there's a balance.
Stay paranoid, stay foolish, but also future looks bright.
Yeah, there's a balance, man. I mean, multiple things can be and are true at once. Yeah. And I think that it's so funny. I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. And I was just talking about, we got onto the topic of sort of mental health and mental well-being. And it's essentially a battle within your own mind. Like, what even is mental health? The term is tossed around a lot, but I was thinking, what does that term actually mean? Because it's not like physical health where, you know, there might be numbers and health markers. They can take your blood and look at certain numbers and so on. And I was thinking, what really is mental health? And I was thinking, I haven't worked this out perfectly, but it's sort of like the story and narrative that runs all day in your brain about yourself and other people and the world, right? So if someone has poor mental health, I mean, if they're mentally ill, it typically means that there's a disconnect, like a strong disconnect between the objective reality and the subjective perception in their head. But if it's just poor mental health, it's kind of like all day their brain is running a bad story about either themselves or other people or the world as a whole, right? So, and then if you have good mental health, you're running a good story. And I think that's a kind of interesting idea. I don't think most people think about it. Most people just say mental health and it's kind of assumed what's understood.
I like what you did right there, but mental health is something that we grew up, I never heard of mental health. I never really heard about depression. I remember I'm a big basketball fan, right? And I remember this one guy played for the Miami Heat. His name was Willie Burt. I don't know, the name rings a bell. And this guy scored 55 points. He's playing for the Heat. And then he just suddenly retires. This is in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I said, what happened to Willie Burt? Oh, he's dealing with depression. He's dealing with some mental health. And me as a Miami Heat fan kid, I'm 12, 13 years old, whatever it was. I'm like, what?
Is that an injury?
You're playing for the Miami Heat. You're scoring 50-something points. You're making millions.
Yeah.
And then I see it at this past year. I have friends that are in the NBA, that are agents, that are players. This new rookie, he got drafted as a stud of a kid, retires before actually ever playing in the NBA due to mental health concerns. And I try to just, listen, I'm not, in school, I was a B+, A- guy. I wasn't the valedictorian guy, but smarter than most, right? So I just try to kind of look at things that is simplified, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. How do we simple this? I think in life, we've learned this when we were young. There's people who look at life as glass half full and people who look at life as glass half empty.
Yep.
And typically, you kind of got to be the guy on the glass half full to really succeed, but also understand, be paranoid a little bit, but don't let that consume your life.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because they're both true, right? That question, is a glass half full or is it half empty? They're both obviously true. And a lot of the things, I think that's why I found it, I'm going to sort of explore this idea more about, the stories and the narratives you tell ourselves and what you focus on, because it can all be true. You could talk to someone who has the most negative and pessimistic and cynical worldview about themselves, about other people, about just the world and the human experience. And they can tell you why they feel the way that they do, and they can say all of these things, and you can be like, yeah, you're right. Everything you just said is correct. Human beings are sinful and violent and go to war and rob each other and rape and steal and assault, and people lie and they cheat and they steal, and there are fraudsters, and there's a whole political system that we understand and we don't understand, and there's probably a political system above the political system, and they don't want people to be getting on with each other. They're trying to divide by race and by gender and by this, and there's all these psyops, and every day is a struggle, and you know what? We're all going to get sick and we're all going to die at the end of it. All of that is true, right? Like, you can have a really dark, I'm not confused by people who have like a dark perception of the world and where they're focused, because I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like, all of that stuff is true, but also human beings are kind and loving and generous, and there's friendship and there's family, and people have children, and babies and kids are wonderful. And we have nature, just go out in nature and it's beautiful, and you can pick your own adventure, whatever it is you want to do. You can, you can pursue this, you can pursue love, you can create this. And that's also all true. Yeah. So it's just like, and you can tell these stories at different levels. You've got the story about yourself and who you think you are, right? And your strengths and weaknesses and the bad things you've done and your guilt, but the things you're proud of and the things you're happy about of. And you can kind of expand that out. You can expand it to your nation. What's the story of the USA, right? Is the USA, you've got the people who they just focus on all the negative in the USA, currently and historically. And you can
colonizers, we took stolen land, we do everything. But on the other side,
yeah, like it's true, right? Like
capitalism, we lived in people out of poverty.
Exactly.
Like,
you can be like, there was this, and there was brutal racism, and there was the KKK, and there was Jim Crow and redlining, and there was slavery, and there was this and this, and it was like, you're not lying, right? It's true, and you can also tell the positive story. So it's like, okay, well, given all of these things are true to varying degrees, what is most helpful to primarily focus on? This doesn't mean you stick your head in the sand and you pretend there's no problems and that everything is perfect. But as you've already said, it's definitely not the best worldview to just be focusing all the time 100% on all the negative stuff. And you can see what happens when people do it. We have probably had times ourselves where for whatever reason, there's just a lot of stuff going on and we're spending too much time on social or traditional media, whatever, and you're just getting hit with all the bad stuff and the negatives and maybe even videos and whatever. And you're just, man, like, it's terrible. Like, this is awful and this is awful. And then you go outside and you're like, oh, actually, look, people are quite nice. Like, people are getting on with each other, and it's a sunny day, and you just go out into the whatever city or town you're in. You're seeing people having fun. They're at the beach. They're with their kids. They're playing. You're like, oh, actually, like, life is kind of nice. So, I think I think though that concept of just what story you tell yourself or what narrative is important, because I mean we have a limited number of decades here on this earth, and which mindset. So that's why I talk a lot about mindset, right? Not in like a corny way, but your mindset does largely determine your reality, and it'll also affect how the people you meet and the way you treat them and the way they treat you. If you walk around with this super negative mindset and you think that people are just generally bad and you think you're generally bad and the world is generally bad, do you know what's going to happen is your biases are going to be proven to be true, because you're going to be unintentionally putting out that energy all the time. No one wants to hang out with the guy or gal who's just negative.
Like, you watch that SNL skit? It's like, wah, wah. Every single... I forget her name, but one thing that you touched on, you said that they both can be true. Again, I wanted the framework of this discussion to really discover what the truth is. And you said the glass half empty, glass half full. They're both true. Anything you look in the world, with the few exceptions, whether it's the Dalai Lama or Jeffrey Dahmer, nobody's 100% good and nobody's 100% evil. It's never black and white. There's a gray area. If you look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? I don't know. It depends who you ask. If you look at Israel, if you look at what's going on in Gaza, who's the good? Who's the bad? China, Taiwan, are they going to attack? They're not attack. There's so much stuff here. Republicans, Democrats, nobody's 100% evil and nobody's 100% good. It's perspective, right? Like, the World Economic Forum was just going on right now, and I did a poll on my Instagram. I said, and one of the best things that Instagram has done is allowed you to have more than 2 options these days if you do the polling. So I said, who makes up the World Economic Forum, right? And it was, great people who are trying to change the world, right? And then it was good people, bad ideas, right? And then it was just globalist takeover, bad ideas kind of a thing. And very few people voted for the good people, good ideas thing. But a good amount of people were like, look, they're good people. They just have some bad policies or bad ideas. But for the large majority of people just were like, globalist takeover, that's not what it is. Listen, I saw the people that were there. Lenny Kravitz is performing. You've got actors. You've got world leaders. Like, for instance, Bill Gates. Oh, he's coming. He's buying all the farmland. It's like, I don't believe that Bill Gates is genuinely a bad person. I could be wrong. But there's a lot of nuance there. With all these people, Klaus Schwab does seem like an evil James Bond villain. But something tells me I would like to believe that if he's running this organization in Davos, Switzerland, and has the biggest billionaires in the world and world leaders and the greatest performers and everyone showing up, that maybe he's not just entirely evil. You saw that Javier Milei show up and just strip down everyone and basically just riff on collectivism and whatever name you give it, whether it's socialism or communism or Marxism. He's like, these are bad ideas. But at the same time, I want to work with you guys because I believe that you are capitalists at heart and want the best of things. So to what you're saying, like the World Economic Forum is an example. Would you agree? Would you disagree? good people, bad ideas, globalist takeover, all evil.
Yeah.
Here's a very nuanced conversation.
It is very nuanced. Yeah. I mean, my audience and my gut would like me to just say absolute evil, tyranny,
totalitarian.
Yeah, exactly. But as you said, it is going to be more nuanced than that. And I'll be honest, I have not, beyond a sort of very quite surface level skimming, I haven't looked into the history and all the goals and aims of the World Economic Forum in massive detail. I'd assume most people haven't, just like most people haven't, looked into the history of many things that could be
something like
exactly. It could be the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It could be the Israel-Palestine conflict. People are like, Zuby, why don't you speak more publicly and boldly on this? I'm like, bro, like, I don't feel particularly well equipped to some of these things have been going on hundreds or thousands of years. And I may even know more. I would wager I know more about both of those situations than most people who are commenting on it. But I still don't feel like I know enough to publicly go out on a platform on TV or on a podcast and say, okay, this. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think that's one weird thing about social media, because that type of behavior is incentivized. Right. It's more important to be first than to be right in terms of the attention you get. And it's more important to simply take a side. You're more rewarded for just taking a side. Absolutely, than you are for having any type of nuance. And I think part of the reason why people do that as well is because, of course, you've got the social media technological factor, which is new. But what is not new is the world and human beings are incredibly complicated and nuanced. And I think that what happens is, I'm no psychologist, but the way that I understand it is, as we navigate the world, our brain simplifies things to heuristics, right? So, I mean, what is a chair? This is a question. Describe what is a chair?
Something that's just comfortable to sit in right here.
Okay. Some people might be, a chair it's got four legs. Like our brains make things what we want to do. You could see a tree stump that's the right height. You could see a log. You could see, right? You could see a stone. It could be a bench. It could be something that looks like a chair or whatever, and its function can change. An object that's a chair could also be a table at another time. It could be this, it could be that. But our brains are just like, I think we see things based on what our purpose is. So we're using heuristics all the time. I think it's quite fascinating that even when it comes to our senses, like if I look at you, everything else goes blurry. Right? I have my peripheral vision, but I can only focus on one thing at a time. If I then focus on the microphone just in front of you, you go blurry. Yeah. Right? So the world is incredibly complicated. We have like a gazillion inputs coming in all the time, and we turn our attention towards what meets our purpose. So I think that what we always do is people like heuristics. So it's much easier to navigate the world if some people and groups are just bad and others are good. Yeah. And you see people do this with politics, with religion. In bad times, it can happen with race, ethnicity, nationality. It can even happen between men and women when you have people just like, okay, men are good and women are bad, or vice versa, right? You have some people their worldview is that simplistic. That's the heuristic they operate off, right? Men are bad, so I'm going to, just run that heuristic until proven otherwise.
Tribalism, right? And then you just want to villainize the other people on the other
team.
So
look at the way when people get really, really deep into politics, and whether they're on quote unquote even the concepts the left and the right. I'm very careful to even use those terms.
Really? Why?
Because it goes with the idea. First of all, it's such a gross oversimplification. Right? If you look at the population of the USA, so let's say it's 350 million. Right?
400.
Who is the left and who is the right? Yeah. Like, what does that even mean? Right? You've got 350 million people. A lot of them are quite apolitical. Most people converge somewhere around the middle, right? Like a reasonable liberal or a reasonable Republican or Democrat. Like a reasonable conservative is closer to a reasonable liberal than either of them are to the people on the true far ends.
The whole horseshoe theory?
Absolutely.
This is one of the greatest things that I've learned since being part of valuetainment and understanding politics. Because my life has kind of been in three phases. I was a nightlife guy in Miami, having a great time, doing my thing. I was doing stand-up comedy, making no money, what have you, but having fun.
Yeah.
For 10 years, 15 years now, I got into finance, stopped having fun for the most part, working my tail off, made my money. And now for the past 5 years, I've been doing podcasting and having more fun again.
Mixing
the point
it,
is this. I've constantly been trying to learn, trying to evolve, right? Outwork, out strategize, out improve, outlast the competition. And politically, obviously being around valuetainment, being part of PBD podcast, I kind of got to know what's going on here. I used to be a little bit further left. Actually, it turns out I'm actually more right. I don't know which. I'm a JFK Democrat. What does that mean? It actually means I'm more of like a, a Bush Republican. I'm trying to find my way. Like I'm not fixated and being like clinging to exactly what I am. But what I realized, someone told me that politics, especially in America, Glenn Beck was telling me how that's in America. In Europe, it's actually different. And the reason I like your perspective is because you have a global perspective. Your family's from Nigeria, and then you lived in the UK, Dubai, Saudi. Saudi. You've been around the block. So me, I'm just American, straight up. But what I learned about this horseshoe theory is that the left of the horseshoe is a lot closer to the right of the horseshoe than the top of the horseshoe. So everything you're saying is completely valid. Where a center-left moderate
and it's always been
close
like
to
that.
a center-right moderate versus the far left and the far right, as you think that they're completely literal opposites, but they're actually way closer together than you would suspect.
Yep, and for an extreme example, look at the 20th century once again, right? You saw examples of extreme right governments and extreme left governments, and both resulted in millions of dead bodies, right, under their quote unquote greater good. So yeah, I avoid these sort of. It's tricky because when you communicate, you need to communicate in language that people understand. And to be understood, sometimes you do have to make categorizations, and sometimes you have to make generalizations, statements that are a little bit sweeping, just so people
are hyperbolic.
Yes, exactly. So that people understand it. That's something that me personally in my communication, I'm just very careful of. I don't like to be.
You're measured.
Yeah, I don't like to be any more polarizing or divisive or inflammatory than is necessary, right? Which, I could get more clicks and views if I chose to play into that.
If you wanted more eyeballs,
for sure.
You could just be a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure, right? I could.
Provocative.
I could be way more provocative, but I again, it's about truth, right? I'm trying to find like what's actually accurate, and also what is helpful. If I want to bring people towards my set of views or values, or I want to influence or persuade people, or I simply want people to open up their minds and listen and think, then the best way to do it isn't by just making giant generalizations about millions or billions of people, or just wildly inaccurate statements or things like that.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people respect you, Zuby, is because you're not looking for that clout. You're not looking for the the attention economy, the eyeballs. Every time I see you talk, I learn something every time. I'm like, man,
that's dope.
Zuby, all right, cool. First conversation we had on PBD podcast, you're like, yeah, Saudi Arabia and Riyadh compared to New York City. I'm like, New York City all day. You're like, not so fast. Slowly but surely, you could have been right. Let me go to the next subject. So we're talking about the state of the world. We're talking about politics. We're talking about socioeconomic change. Talking about chaos versus order and international rules-based civilization. But this year, 2024, 40% of the world's population, which is 4 billion people, which is over 40 countries, are going to be voting this year.
Okay.
Did you know that? 2024, more.
I didn't know this. I didn't know the statistic.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big year for elections, right? So they're calling it democracy's Super Bowl. This is all over the all the papers, all the magazines, all the outlets are basically like, this is what's going on here.
That's so American.
It does have some credence, right? So, and they're basically saying that the outcomes of these elections will determine the future of the 21st century. You appropriately said we're in the first quarter of it right now. It's basically, we got 1 year left of the first quarter. So they're calling it democracy Super Bowl. Here are the countries that are going to be voting, the big countries. Obviously, we have USA. We know what's going on here. But in the UK, in India, Ukraine is going to be voting. We'll see what happens with our friend out there. Taiwan, they just voted. They voted in a very anti-CCP government in Taiwan. There's that conversation. Russia's going to be voting. I think we already know who's going to win that election. Our friend Vladimir. Iran is going to be voting. I doubt they're going to be free and open, but we'll see what happens there. But the point is, some are going to be open and free. Some will be a little more gray areas, and some, not so much at all. So, but everyone is going to obviously be looking first and foremost at the United States election. I think that's fair to say. But there are major implications around the world. Just put on your political hat, your geopolitical hat. What do you expect in 2024 elections, the United States? Not even necessarily a prediction who's going to win per se, but what are you expecting to happen in America? And what is going to be the byproduct of basically what happens all around the world? What will that mean for the rest of the world? What happens here in the United States?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, given where we are as we record this today, it's looking like it's going to be Trump versus Biden again, which, as a non-American, and I know lots of my American friends agree with me on this, I'm kind of like, really?
Yeah.
Like how, again, I look at the fact that there's like 1/3 of a billion people in this country, and I know so many great and decent and talented Americans. I think I've said this before, that I feel like almost any American that I am friends with would do a better job at being president than the last couple. Obviously I'm way more pro-Trump than I am pro-Biden, but I was I was being called ageist on Twitter the other day because I literally posted a tweet saying I think it would be cool if America tested out a president who's under 75 years old. And people were saying that that's age discrimination and this and that, and I'm just like, I think it's crazy that in a country with so much talent and so many people and so many smart, brilliant minds, that it's still just this octogenarian battle, and that there's so many people in political office who, I mean, Joe Biden is 81.
Yeah.
Do you know, okay, I'll tell you what's crazy to think about. I remember 1994, 30 years ago.
Yeah, let me go back.
1994.
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
Who was president? Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton, that's right.
Okay, this is when I was a child. Bill Clinton is younger than the current president. Right now.
Yeah, Bill Clinton is what, 76, 78 right now?
Something like that. So,
ran into Bill Clinton the other day.
Oh, really?
And it was like, Bill Clinton? At a bowling alley in New York. Like, can't make this up. It's like, but yeah, Bill Clinton was probably in his late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah,
president.
But isn't that just like a bit of a mind blow that the current president is older than the guy who was president 30 years ago? Like, that doesn't even sound right. And look, it's not just age, like, because some people were like, why does the age matter? And I'm like, look, I was like, if I must explain it, it's like, there's multiple factors here. Being the president of the United States of America is a very demanding job. It's very high energy, physically and mentally demanding. You have to travel. You have to be meeting all these people. You're probably going to be missing out. It ages people like nothing else.
I mean, we saw the pictures before and after with Obama. Speaking of the last young president right there. Biden, whether it's looks or whether it's demeanor, whether it's mentality, clearly not on the same page.
No.
Trump, somehow his hair and his orange skin is still looking okay.
For his age, he has a lot of energy and he's in decent physical condition. But he's still a man in his late 70s who, if he became president again, would turn 80. The idea of people turning 80 in the office, like, this is, again, in U.S. history, this is like a first-time occurrence. And I'm just like...
72 years old. She's dealing with hearing issues, with eye issues. I'm like, and my mom's younger than Biden.
For sure. I mean, in many, many industries, you cannot have certain jobs past a certain age, right? Like, I don't want my surgeon to be 80. I don't want my pilot to be 80. And people are like, oh, well, like, I'm sure there are 80-year-olds who are capable of flying planes, but I don't generally speaking, I don't think it would be a good idea for, all these airline companies to start recruiting people who are in their late 70s and 80s, especially when you have a pool of younger people who are out there. And
people are basically saying, dude, really? Round 2 again?
Yeah.
Round 3 of Trump again? The age for sure. But if we could think positive for a second.
Okay, sure. What do I think is going to play out?
Experience, these candidates. Is there any positives that we can take about before we enter this collision course?
Well, I mean, look, in my personal viewpoint, a Trump presidency would be better than a Biden presidency, and I think the Trump presidency was better than the Biden presidency. I also think that I'm going to kind of do a high ground maneuver here. A couple things. I think that the truth is who is president does not matter as much as people would like to think that it does. I remember being I was in the U.S. actually in 2008, like during Obama mania. I was doing some training for the company I was working for, so I was visiting from the UK, and I remember the hype. I remember the energy. Like, you know, I remember Bush becoming president. I remember Obama becoming president and being reelected. I remember Trump, and now, you know, Biden, and so on. And every single time, well, firstly, it's the most important one ever. Everyone's, you know, this is the one, guys. This is the one, you know, vote or die. This is, you know, threat to democracy. We need to, it's always like this massive battle. And the truth is, yeah, of course, there are differences between administrations, but it's not anywhere near as drastic as people think. It's fascinating how much energy goes to, you know, the big federal one, and then people like ignore what's happening locally, or even ignore what's happening in their state. The things that really are going to affect
politics is local. You're not focused on, if you got a pothole in the street, or anything's going on in crime in your community, that's your local representatives.
Yeah,
that's your
local.
That's your state representatives. That's your governor. Trump ain't doing anything for you. Biden ain't doing anything for you.
Yeah, so if you are going to get like really hyped about politics, it would make more sense to get really hyped about the stuff that's happening closer to your home. I also just think, you know, multiple things. I also just think, what can you control, right? You go out there and vote if you want to vote, right? Please do. But you don't have control of that. You don't really have control of who gets into office. And you certainly don't have control of what happens once they're in there. What you do have control of is yourself, your own actions and your own words, and the things you pursue in your life, and your own health. And then outside of that, your family, if you're a parent, your children, your local community, all that kind of stuff. That's really where it happens. Like, look, I'll be blunt here. I think if you are a loser and you've got a loser mindset, it doesn't matter who is in office. You are going to continue losing. Right? Until you fix your mindset and you take action on that, right? A loser is a loser under a red administration or a blue administration. If you are winning and you have a winner mindset, or you're on that trajectory and you're getting your life together and you're doing the things that need to be done, it doesn't matter who is sitting in the Oval Office. You're going to be okay because you've got your stuff handled. You've got your business handled. So like I say, if people want to, you know, get hype about it like it's a sports match and do their stuff, then cool, right? Like, go for it. But ultimately, one reason why I think that some people get obsessed with politics in an unhealthy fashion is I think it's a form of outsourcing responsibility, because then you can just blame politics and the political climate for everything, right? It's the same reason why I think people get caught up in other victim narratives, whether this is around you know, sexism and the patriarchy, you know, that feminist worldview, or it's the everything is racist worldview, and the whole system, structures, institutions, the whole nation, the whole world is racist, and, you know, I'm not where I should be because of all those mean institutions and people who are holding me down. Victim mentality, right? Like, it's never you. It's always
the hardest thing to do
something else.
In the mirror and be like, you're fat, you're lazy, you're broke, you're out of shape. Nobody likes you. You're male pattern balding. You're not cool. Your jokes aren't funny. But why wasn't the people love me?
Yeah,
it's like, because you got to fix yourself.
But you know what's dope about that is when you do take that accountability, you have the control 100%. Of it. You've got the control of it.
A man is born as a clean slate.
Yeah.
This is gonna be controversial. You could be born as an unattractive, short, fat, bald man, whatever. You can figure it out.
Yes.
You can work out. You can get in the gym. You can make money. You can learn game. There's so many things you can do here. Not to get all red pill right now, but if you're just born an ugly woman, it's like, you better start reading, girl, because nobody's gonna wipe you up.
I have an interesting theory on that as well. That's so interesting that you went down that way.
Yeah.
Because almost no young woman is ugly. Ugly women are extremely rare if you think about it. It's really rare to see, let's say, I'd say, okay, I'm gonna put this statement out here. Let's say most women under about 35, maybe you could push this to 40, who are not fat, are at least somewhat attractive.
Yeah.
I think actually ugly women are rare. They exist, but it's pretty rare. And most men find most women in that category somewhat attractive.
Yeah,
right?
If they're not completely out of shape.
Exactly.
They're not
Yeah.
They put some makeup on. They, you know, get the, yes.
Yeah, it's always been the case that most men find most women attractive and most women find most men unattractive.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are many things that you can do. Look, there's 8 billion people in this world. Whether you are a man or you are a woman, there are people out there who will like you and find you attractive and so on, right? Because I hear the same thing as well. You know, when men, particularly online, when young men are complaining about, you know, all the girls just want to date, you know, the top 10% of guys and this and this and this. And I get where those notions come from, but the idea that, okay, like, there's no 25-year-old man that you could like put in front of us and like we're allowed to like coach and mentor him, right? And he's just a completely hopeless, right? We could be like, okay, first of all, bro, like let's grooming, like, you know, get a haircut, get yourself like looking nice. Look, you're wearing terrible clothes, nothing fits you. Like let's buy you, let's get you some outfits, let's style you. Oh, like you're in terrible shape, let's get you with it. Just that, a decently groomed, well dressed, and you're in decent shape.
Up, buddy.
Like unless your face is just like you were just gifted with the most. You know what? Even if that were the case,
still figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get good at speaking, communicating, carry yourself with confidence, whatever. Build some success. There will be women who will find you attractive. You know what? They might. I've heard women say about men that he's kind of like he's not that, but like there's something about it. There's something about him.
Rick, I wasn't attracted to him, but something about him. I don't know if it was the Maserati or the mansion or even just he was funny.
He was funny.
Maybe he was funny. Around. But to circle back to the point that I think you were making is that so many people are fixated on what's going on in the White House, but they're not worried about what's going on in their house. Now, when I went from being broke as a joke, being in the nightlife world and just telling comedy, this was 2005, 2006, 2007. This is the Bush administration. I got a job in 06, 07, so tail end of that. And I changed my life. I get into the financial world. But I've never played the victim. I've made money under Bush. I made money under Obama. I made money under Trump. I made money under Biden. Whoever wins this next election, I'm still going to keep succeeding. So are you, because you have that mindset.
You'll still be in shape.
So you're still like, it is what it is. So stop focusing on what's going on in the White House. What's going on in your house is where you need to focus on. And I'll just say this, and then we'll move on to the next one. You brought up 2008, right? But you remember what was going on with
Obama and
McCain.
Yeah.
So right now, I think it's a very unique election, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't think since basically the Bush years, I don't think people in America are as fixated and as tribalized as you would suspect.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's tribalism. Clearly, there's people on red and white, red and blue. But you know, a lot of the politics came about. This is probably before you really remember it, because you weren't necessarily living in the States. Up until about 2000, Clinton, people got along. Whether it was George Bush, whether it was Clinton, Ross Perot, Reagan, it wasn't as divisive. Newt Gingrich showed up. Bill Clinton got a blowjob from Monica Lewinsky back in the day. All hell broke loose. What happened? But what happened is, in the early 2000s, it was 9/11, right? Everyone coalesced around George W. Bush. Rudy Giuliani became America's mayor. We all came together. By 2004, you know, we're in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. By 2007, by 2008, global financial crisis, recession. Dude, a ham sandwich could have been running on the Democratic Party of things and most likely would have beat John McCain. There was no groundswell for saying more of that. More of the Twin Towers coming down, more wars, more recession, nobody. So McCain was up against a very, very tough opponent. When Barack Obama shows up, people are like, yo, give me this dude who seems cool as hell. Now, it turns out that the facade of Obama and the swagger of Obama was probably a lot better than his actual policies. So what happened was, so Obama gets reelected. He tries to come against, he beats McCain. Romney shows up. Romney basically didn't lean into, Romney is the exact opposite of Donald Trump. And now I'm not talking about politics now. Romney should have been like, yeah, I'm a fucking billionaire. Yeah, I know what's going on. This is how I roll. I'm going to give you economic. He was like, I'm sorry I made so much money. I'm sorry that I believe in this. Sorry that he was like apologizing. when Obama's like, he could have beat Obama.
Mm-hmm.
He could have. But the point is, where I'm going with all this, after 8 years of Obama, okay, and Trump shows up, you're either, Obama was so divisive that you're like, all right, I'm picking this guy now,
Yep.
right? Just like how you were picking Obama because you weren't picking Bush.
Yep.
And then, obviously, Hillary's an extension of Obama, that whole situation. You go with Trump, and then, so where we're at today is I think people are like, all right, I saw what the first 4 of Trump was.
Yeah.
I saw what the first 4 of Biden was, currently is. Now I actually have the luxury of just kind of sitting back and being like, I have a case example of what each 4 did.
Yes.
And the common joke that a lot of our friends will be is like, I hope you missed the mean tweets.
Yeah.
You like the wars, you like the open borders, you like the high inflation, but thank God we don't got those mean tweets.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are looking at Trump and they're being like, yeah, I wasn't really ready to give him a shot in 16 or in 20, but 2024, I think I'm willing to do this now. And I have conversations with leftists, not leftists, because there's a difference between
Liberals.
a liberal and a leftist, but just liberal Democratic friends, and they're actually saying, yeah, I'd give Trump a shot. There was a 0% chance they would have voted for him in 2016 or 2020.
The fact that he's not tweeting probably helps as well.
But probably the what?
I don't think his tweets. It's good that he's not tweeting from his perspective.
It's not.
Yeah, because look, I think there's some. Again, we were talking heuristics. There's some basic heuristics I've seen in politics that generally seem to be quite predictive. Number one is that when people are generally unhappy with the direction they feel their country is going, this could be economics, it could be social, culture, whatever, they will typically vote for the change candidate, right? So as you said, right? Bush comes in, you've got Iraq war, Afghanistan, whatever. I remember towards the end of the Bush thing, people were not happy with where the U.S. was. It's global state. Exactly. Exactly. Then it was,
at the end of his
what was Obama's slogan? Change. Right? So cool. You vote for the change candidate. And then after Obama's first term, people were like, I don't know, but we're not so unhappy that we really need to switch out. Cool. Obama again. Then, okay, Trump is the change candidate next. Boom. Trump comes in, change. And then sufficiently enough people, I'm not going to go into legitimacy of elections, but sufficiently enough people disliked Donald Trump and his antics and his behavior and whatever that they're like, okay, we want a change, right? I don't think people voted for Biden. They voted against Trump.
No doubt.
So I think it largely comes down to who is the referendum on. I think if this election, I'll give my prediction. I think if this election becomes a referendum on Biden, then Trump will win. If it is another referendum on Trump, like the previous one was, then it's likely that Trump will not win. I think the best thing Trump can do is actually kind of what he's doing and not be so much in the public eye and not be as loud and noisy and whatever. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think if he just sort of because I know a lot of people, even outside the USA. Here's an interesting one. So in my immediate family, there's 7 people in my immediate family. And certainly by Western standards, most of us are more, at least socially, more conservative, right? Like, we're not like a hardcore political family, but again, by British or American standards, we're generally a bit more, right, conservative leaning. But if we were all American, I would have been the only person who voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020.
In your family?
In my own family.
Gotcha.
Right? So there are millions and millions of people out there who actually they lean a touch more or quite a bit more towards, what Trump's actually, if you just took away the personalities and you looked at the policies, you looked at the platforms, they'll be like, oh, actually, I'm more on this side. But they're so put off by the Trump as a character or the tweets or certain statements he's made or whatever that they're like, oh no, I don't want to vote for, I don't want to support that. You even have plenty of Christians and religious people who are in this camp where on a platform basis they're like, actually I'd lean a little bit more that way, but I can't vote for this guy because of X, Y, and Z.
And I want to ask you this question.
Sure.
If you're going to judge Trump, and there's people going to be watching this, be like, all right, buddy, didn't you vote for Biden?
Mm-hmm.
But what I've realized is if you're going to judge Trump by himself, by his personality or as his character, you're either going to absolutely love the guy or hate the guy. There's no in between.
Polarizing.
But if you judge him by the message, by being a messenger and his message, it's a lot more palatable.
Yeah.
America first.
Do you know
protect our borders?
Do you know how
sense.
Do you know how I judge politicians?
So,
Okay. I mean, what makes a good golfer? Open question. What makes a good golfer?
What makes a good golfer? I think I would say it's a three-pronged approach. Meaning, I'm not a golfer.
Yeah, sure. I'm curious. I don't.
You got to have
either.
a good driver. You got to have a good wedge game, and you got to be a good putter. You can't just be one of the three.
I think it's where the ball lands. Right.
That's the most simple answer.
I think it's where I think
put the ball near the hole.
I don't think I don't think it's what does your swing look like, like your technique and this and this, right? Like, and I think so. If I look at a Trump, a lot of people are judging his swing and his outfit and the trash talk that he does before he golfs and this and this and this. But if I look at the results, if I look at, okay, what are the economy numbers? What are the unemployment numbers? How many new wars were started or propagated? How many places got bombed? Like the things, like actual political statistic things we can look at. I'm like, okay, he had a solid presidency, right? If I forget about the tweets, but Zuby, he said this thing, but he's got small hands, but he's orange, but I don't like his haircut. But then I'm like, okay, but where the ball landed was pretty good. And then you can have another person who, man, look at his outfit. Look at how handsome he is. Look at the way he swings that club. Look at his shoes, da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, but did the ball land where you wanted it to? So that's my heuristic for when I'm looking at politicians and I'm thinking, okay, which mayor or governor or president or prime minister, how did they actually do?
Yeah, results.
I exactly. I have the ability to, like, this is not who do I want to hang out with, who do I want to play sports with, who do I want to be my friend, whatever. It's like, who is going to just get the job done and not blow stuff up and, you know.
Yeah, clearly. So quick question on this, and we'll go to the next one. You gave the example of your family and, you know, conservative and this, but you also, you know, you've got a good depth of perspective because the Nigerian roots, you know, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, UAE, you know, London. If you just had not even just your circle of friends, but the people, you know, the one phone call away, all your people, let's say it's 500 people.
Okay.
Right? Family, friends, close friends of all different types of people. How do they perceive Donald Trump? How do they perceive Obama? Even Biden to a lesser extent. But they're not involved in U.S. politics.
Okay.
If you could just simplify.
Non-Americans?
Non-Americans.
Okay.
If they can filter down what all those people from all those different countries would say about Trump, would say about an Obama, how would they break that down?
I think it largely depends on where you are. Nigeria is very pro-Trump overall, and always was. Yeah, Trump, because I don't know if you've ever seen, they actually have like global approval ratings for American presidents.
I've seen this, yeah.
Yeah, which is quite fascinating to look at. And Nigeria is one of the most pro-Trump countries in the world.
Well, it's funny because I remember looking at this in 2016. It could have been 2020, but back in the day, there was only a few countries that actually viewed Trump in a positive light.
Yeah.
One was Russia. Another one was Israel. I just found that it's Nigeria. Not a lot of countries that have.
Philippines was one of the highest.
Okay.
And it's interesting to kind of connect those dots. I think that there are many countries that are like, we would like that type of leader. There are people who are like, man, we need a Trump in Nigeria. We need a Trump in the Philippines. We need a strong person who's going to come in and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. You know, if you go to, I don't know, the Netherlands or Sweden or Denmark or whatever, somewhere like Trump is going to have a low approval rating because he's like the antithesis of their kind of like culture of decorum and, you know, like decency.
Like demagogue.
Yeah, right.
Like,
so yeah, exactly. And
in those countries, some of them are trending a little more conservative these days.
Yeah, they will, because people, again, like when sometimes the sad thing about human beings is that they often need to personally have themselves or their families affected by something for them to care about it or for them to think that it's important. Right? So it's easy to be asleep and have your head in the ground or whatever. Oh, this is not a big issue. That's not a big issue. But then when it comes to your door, or when your son or your daughter is now dealing with the thing, that's when it really registers for people. And I wish it didn't need to always, it didn't always need to come to that. So even if I look at, another thing that's been a massive topic over the last, 8 years or so at this point, right? Like the whole transgenderism craze and everything, right? I've been talking about this at least publicly since 2018, but privately from like 2015-ish. I remember like having conversations almost a decade ago at this point, having these type of conversations. And I remember in 2015, 2016, even 2017, people thought that I was like being very overly alarmist, or they'd deny that it was really happening, or like, because it sounds far-fetched, it sounds silly. You're like, come on, like, you're not gonna have men identifying as women and entering sports, like, come on, like right, like that's silly, right?
And when you won the
exactly.
powerlifting,
yeah, and they're gonna be like, oh, come on, they're not gonna push it on children, and what, like, it, because it doesn't sound possible. And then if you look at where that is, fast forward 6, 7, 8 years, and people are like, it's been much more in people's faces, and like their own child. I've spoken to people, particularly in the U.S., who were like, my daughter plays, middle school basketball or soccer or whatever, and the opponent's team last weekend had a guy on the female team, and like, and that's when it becomes an issue. That's when it's like, oh no, this is real. This is a proper thing. Or actually, oh, my 7-year-old son came back from school and he's asking me very odd questions about like what gender he is, or he thinks he's a girl. Like, it's like, oh, this is real. This is not just like some crazy thing that people are talking about on social media, or those right-wing commentators are trying to make it. It's like, oh, this is actually a thing. This is in the schools. This is like here, this is there. So I think that's part of why there's this awakening. And this is why I've made this point on many podcasts now, and I think it's an important point. I've said that I believe that we are past peak woke. I think that peak woke was probably around 2020, 2021. I think that there are now sufficiently enough people, just sane people. I'm not even going to say like the left and the right or liberal, like just sane people, right? That 80% of people who are just like, kind of reasonable and rooted in reality, who are like, it's gone a bit too far, right? Look at the public sentiment towards BLM now versus in 2020. Night and day. Look at the public sentiment towards like the whole transgender, like extreme LGBT agenda, not just like, I don't know, a normal homosexual person or whatever, but like the stuff that's being pushed on children, the hormones, the stuff with women's sports, putting men in female prisons. Like, firstly, the level of awareness is much, much higher, but I see the level of vocalization and pushback is so much higher. There are people who maybe they were a bit concerned in 2018, but they were afraid to say something. And now they're willing to speak. It's the same as what happened during the whole, what I call the scamdemic era. Go back to spring 2020. There are millions, billions of people around the world who are like, something's not quite right here. This is a bit weird. This is a bit uneasy, but I don't want to say anything. I don't want to rock the boat or whatever. And then you fast forward to like, mid 2022, and people are like, oh yeah, like this is, oh yeah, the mask thing's a scam, or actually like, like the vaccine we're doing. So all of a sudden, This is happening, I think, with the entire sort of that whole basket of ideas and ideologies that we commonly refer to as, wokeness. I think that's past, and so it doesn't mean that it's like dead in the water, but and there's some very obvious examples of this. I mean, if you look at some of the boycotts that have happened with certain companies, whether it was like the whole Bud Light boycott or the way people responded to like the Target stop, like there's been some sort of major incidents where I'm like, had that happened 5 years ago, the pushback would not have been that way. You wouldn't have, billions wiped off their market value, or people taking such strong stances. So I think that, the pendulum went that way, and now we're at the very early stage of that return.
Yeah, reversion to the mean or equilibrium.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what we've learned, certainly since 2020, because we're going to look back and say like, okay, just how we looked at 9/11, and that's when the millennials, the generation sort of, there was a shift in that, and there's the Gen Z generation. Like, we're going to look at 2020 and say, all right, there is a clear distinction between the world pre-2020 and post-2020. But I think we all have to agree that nobody has the answers immediately, or at least you have to give people the chance to process the information. So some people were saying very early, well, this, and this. And people were like, well, I don't know. I think it's this, and this.
Yeah.
And we're all just sort of giving opinions. And then some opinions are right, some opinions are wrong, but nobody had the answers. And I think it gets divisive when it's like, of course it's this. And they're like, well, I thought it was this. I'm getting this. But sometimes, you know, they say time heals all wounds. Everything that we are realizing, whether it's the COVID stuff, whether it's the political stuff, whether it's the LGBTQ woke stuff, you're giving people a little more time to be like, yeah, I really thought that BLM was a good thing because I agree with that. Like, Black Lives Matter, it's great. Sure. But when you peel back the curtain, it's like, well, it actually just turns out to be sort of like a neo-Marxist, anti-nuclear family, like Ponzi scheme. It's like, okay.
You can also, again, just simply do, did they make things better or worse?
That too.
Right? Are race relations better pre all that stuff or afterwards, right? What are the tangibles? Like, what are the tangible things that have gotten better in that regard? How close is the ball to the hole? Exactly, exactly. And people are like, oh, well, the best I ever hear from people is, oh, well, like, you know, there's like increased awareness of racism. I'm like, I think people like have been aware of racism forever. Yeah. And I think actually all that's happened is you've made some people very defensive and you've created the sort of a backlash movement. And yeah, I don't also, in my personal view, raising the quote unquote racial consciousness of a population is not actually a good thing. I think the world and societies and nations are much better where the first thing people notice about each other is not their skin color, where they just sort of, the way I've been raised forever has been about, like, yes, we have eyes. When I talk to you, I don't know, the idea that you are a white man is like, doesn't really register in my brain. It's certainly not the, it's certainly one of the least interesting things about you. I would like to think that the fact that I am black is not a particularly, I didn't work hard towards that.
No, I'm looking,
right?
I'm looking at
I didn't work really hard for that achievement. No. You know what I mean? It's just like, it just is. And this is also why like racism is stupid and always has been. And I don't think it's good to like spend so much time on like a topic like that it makes people just like weird and awkward, and they start like, oh, I don't really know what's the, and I'll tell you what, in my personal experience, I felt that during, remember the whole BLM summer, even being all out in the UK, I felt just the rise of weirdness where like people I know or don't know were kind of like, how do I interact with black people? Like, have I been doing this wrong the whole time? Like, do I need to do? And I'm like, dude, please just be normal. Like, don't
act one way in front of a certain race and then act in front of another way. Yeah, then you meet an Asian person and you're bowing and then give me 5, brother. Like, give me the skin on the back. It's like, just be
just
yourself.
Awkward, yeah.
Don't start putting on a sombrero if you're gonna hang out with a Mexican guy. Just do you.
Just be
They'll
normal.
accept you for who you are.
Yeah, just be normal, and that's more than sufficient. Yeah. That's my world.
Let's get into, you know, you brought up what's going on with the woke and that, you know, you've said, quote unquote, people are just fed up and tired of the woke crap, right? You know, your buddy, Elon Musk, you've interviewed him, you've spent some time with him. He's basically, he's saying that DEI must die. He's called wokeness, the woke mind virus.
Yes.
So he's, you know, everything that he's doing on Twitter, he said DEI must die, right? He said the point was to end discrimination, not to replace it with different discrimination, right? So reverse racism, essentially. You know, you've highlighted the fact that diversity initiatives are a complete pipe dream and affront to fairness, liberty, and dignity, right? So people are just fed up with this woke stuff. I remember a time when woke was actually a good term. Hey, you're enlightened to sort of the injustices that have happened in the world. Yeah. Cool. All right, woke. Right? So these concepts of DEI, I want to kind of get into that because I feel like you have this. The average person thinks DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. This is great.
That's how BLM got you too.
BLM. You know, Black Lives Matter, of course they do. These 3-letter acronyms. ESG, what? Environmental, social, and governance.
I've already decided that if
things like this.
if I ever turn bad and I just become like an evil dictator or something, I'm gonna mask it all. I'm gonna find like a nice 3-letter acronym that no one in their right mind can disagree with as a statement, and I'll use that as the banner for all of my policies.
Dude, when I was growing up, they said, "You're down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. Other people's property." But like these 3-letter acronyms for sure. But So for the people out there, there's some people in the audience are going to be like, of course DEI is ridiculous. Of course ESG is ridiculous. Of course BLM was a sham, whatever it was. There's some people are going to be like, no, DEI is a great thing. Diversity, equity, inclusion. But you have Elon Musk basically saying DEI must DIE. You're basically saying that people are tired of the woke mind crap. Talk to the average person out there who thinks that DEI is a good thing. You know, companies are embracing DEI. Diversity, equity, inclusion. What's the real answer that's going on here?
Man, this is a huge question. I think the first thing to recognize is something that I touched on in a post that it was the sort of former part of a post you mentioned, and I said that the biggest reason so-called diversity initiatives do not work is because of human diversity itself. So everybody is different, and the whole concept of diversity is acknowledging that and celebrating that. You know, the ultimate minority is the individual. So firstly, it's probably important to say that diversity is more than just race, gender, and sexuality. I don't know who decided that those are the three factors that determine what diversity means.
The outside.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in my opinion.
The inside, it should be your mind, your beliefs, your opinions, diversity of opinion. Right?
Yeah, so the idea that having a room full of people of different skin colors or ethnicities who all think the same is more diverse than having a group of people of similar skin colors or whatever's backgrounds who think differently is, how's A more diverse than B, right? It's all nonsensical. I think another thing is that, look, the example I've given is that take a household, take a family. You've got siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister.
Okay.
Wildly different opinions.
Exactly. I was going to say, do you have the same opinions?
Not even close.
Do you have the same jobs?
Not even close.
Do you have the same income?
No.
Okay, but you were raised by the same parents, same household, same rules, whatever. Okay, I have 5.
Sense in a direction.
Yes.
Here.
Okay, I have 5 siblings. I have 4 siblings. I'm one of 5. We all have different jobs. We all have different incomes. We all have different interests, hobbies, proclivities. We've taken different life paths and so on. We were all raised by the same parents, under the same roof, treated, fairly equally and so on. But because of this thing called diversity, and because of the possibility of freedom and human autonomy, we made different choices, and that's all well and good. So if you're not going to get, now we're moving on to the equity piece, which largely, means sort of equality of outcome. If you don't even get equality of outcome amongst siblings raised in the same household, what on earth, what delusion makes you think you're going to get equality of outcome across an entire population or across an entire nation? It's the reason I call it an affront to human dignity is because it actually treats human beings as if we're just blobs or cogs in some type of machine, right? Men and women are totally interchangeable. Every individual is interchangeable, every group or whatever, right? We're all just widgets, and there's no real humanity. There's no free will. There's no choice. Like everything that happens is just the result of, like systems and processing. And it's just like, that's such an anti-human sentiment, and it's not rooted in any type of reality. And you also cannot have freedom and equality of outcome, because I believe strongly that human beings are created in the image of God, and we are equal in value, like in terms of like moral value and legal value and so on. But we're extremely unequal in any measurable way. We're different heights. Every single person, we all look different. We have different interests, different personalities. We're born in different places, different socioeconomic state. Like some people work hard, some people don't work hard. Like we're totally different. We make choices throughout the course of our lifetime. And so if you give people freedom, even like basic freedom, even like, China level freedom, even North Korea level freedom, you're not going to get complete equality of outcome, because you can't have both. Equality of outcome is the antithesis of freedom. That's why communism is as horrible as it is, because it's just, okay, we're just going to cut everyone down to the bottom, right? We're just going to clip everybody's wings, and it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Now everyone's, and then you're eventually equally dead. And so it doesn't work. And also it's just silly, because I think the idea in itself, particularly when it comes to like the race and gender talk about diversity is the entire thing actually, in my opinion, is very condescending. Because if you simply hire, take any field, any sector, whatever it is, you just go for the, you know, the best person for the job, which is going to include, you know, people are not going to apply equally, just like the people who apply and who are interested, and then you take the best people, you will naturally get a level of diversity, right? Because not all capable people are within like one, it's not like one demographic has a monopoly on talent and capability and hard work, right? You have a company, you've got 100 employees, and it's just like, okay, cool. Like there's talent across the board. So you just naturally get that. You don't need to force it. And you know what else as well is, who cares if not everything, if you have under and over representation in some of the, in various things? Who cares if something has 50% men and 50% women? Why does it matter? Right? Like it doesn't matter. And it's funny because the people who push this don't believe their own crap, because they're very specific with when they push it. And there's no one's trying to get 50% of women, female construction workers, 50% of people who take out your trash and do sanitation. Oh, we need that 50% female. It tends to be, you know, cushy, safe, air-conditioned, nice jobs that they're pushing for the, you know, so-called gender equity and so on. And then there's areas where people just deny it. Like someone would sound, you know, let's take an obvious example. Where it would sound goofy to even sort of push these narratives. Like, I don't know the exact statistics, but I think both the NBA and the NFL are 70% plus black male.
Yeah, I think the NFL is closer to 70. I think
70.
The NBA is probably closer to 80.
80, okay.
My speculation. I think
sure,
the NFL
okay.
is a little bit more white than the NBA.
Sure, let's say 75%. Black men make up 7%, 6 to 7% of the American population, yet 75% of those leagues. If someone were to make the claim that the NBA or the NFL is racist against white people and Asians and Jews, you would be laughed out of the room.
Yeah, well, Mark Cuban is dealing with this.
Yeah, you'd be laughed out the room. But then people do that with other things, right? Then someone's gonna, someone's meritocracy, and also just interest, like individuals and at the group level. I know this is controversial, people, but like people are not equally interested in things, right? There's no ban on black people becoming professional swimmers. Can anyone name a professional probably not, right? Exactly, right. And it's, you know, but then you look at look at sprinting, or man, look at marathon runners. Like why are they all Ethiopian and Kenyan? Like Ethiopia, Kenya. Okay, you know, and someone could have like go into a whole conversation about why this is and so on and so forth. But it's just like it just is as a result. Ironically, as a result of human diversity, the chips do not fall like perfectly equally and everything. Like you can't, if you're just trying to do this bean counting, you're going to be there forever and you're going to be constantly disappointed. And the last point on this, and this is important, which is that to even get those type of outcomes, you would by definition have to enforce some type of actual unfair discrimination. You would have to actually enforce sexism and actually enforce racism and so on. That's the only way you'd actually get it. So the entire thing undermines what they're claiming to be trying to correct for.
Very well. Great point, and great example about, like, me and my sister couldn't be more opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Same parents, same household. You know, I'm a man, she's a woman. Let's start with that. You know, some people forget what that is these days. But completely different interests, completely different merits, and completely different grades, completely everything in school.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of identity politics, you're born in the same family, you're both the same religion, you're both from the same household, everything is out the window. And that's something that I think that we can appreciate, is that the power of the individual to succeed, just like we gave the example of the guy that no matter where you're at, you can fix your life, the 25-year-old guy. The power of the individual and not the collective.
Mm-hmm.
And then the painting with a broad stroke, well, you're black, so you must think this way. You're Jewish, so you must vote this way.
Mm-hmm.
You're a white man, so you must do this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're trans, so you must do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it blows people's minds that Caitlyn Jenner is still a Republican.
Yeah.
Like, so that's the problem with checking all the boxes and putting things in order like this, because it's very hard to do. Last couple of questions before we wrap up.
Yeah, sure thing, bro.
We talked about Elon Musk. I want to get your take on it. I've never spent time with Elon. We're working on that to get here. Well, how much time have you spent with Elon?
Just that evening we recorded the podcast.
The interview was
Thank
awesome. How long did you spend with it?
About 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on two things that are currently happening as we speak this week. Okay, so this isn't like, well, thoughts on Tesla. There's two things going on. So on one hand, he's currently in Auschwitz.
Oh yes, I saw.
With
Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro, right? So he visits Auschwitz, the Nazi Holocaust concentration camp where a million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. So there's a two-part question, and I just kind of want to get the answer on really what the media is doing with Elon at this point. So he's appearing at this European Jewish Association discussing anti-Semitism about this tweet that he did or he liked or he agreed with. He basically has come out and said, look, that was one of my most foolish things I've ever done.
I don't actually know what did he actually say or do. I'm not even familiar.
Basically was like totally agree with whatever it was, but it was taken out of context.
Okay.
But the ADL's going after the Anti-Defamation League, and that he's calling anti-Semitic. So, now, famously he went up on stage and after some of his comments, because look, it's hard to keep up with all his comments, but Apple, IBM, even Disney sort of pulled out their advertising on X. Okay. This is the famous "Go fuck yourself" speech where he basically said you're not going to basically blackmail me for money and for advertising. But if you follow the money, all right, why is he doing this sort of activist campaign in Auschwitz? So that's going on as we speak today, right? Last week, the story in the news is that Elon Musk is on drugs. Oh, did you see this?
I didn't actually see that.
Okay, gotcha. So on the cover of the Wall Street Journal.
Oh.
So it's not like this is,
CNN.
Sure. CNN or any whatever random news outlet. It's at the National Enquirer. Wall Street Journal, they're basically saying Elon's alleged drug use worries board members about Tesla and SpaceX. Elon's alleged drug use includes LSD, cocaine, ecstasy, ketamine, private parties with non-disclosure agreements, Art Basel in Miami. So there's concerning his drug use is concerning jeopardizing government contracts and breaking down company policies. We'll pull up an article of the Wall Street Journal. But you've spent time with Elon. Mm-hmm. So my question is more about the core person that you've met.
Yeah.
I don't think he's anti-Semitic. I don't think he has a major drug problem. Mm-hmm. I just think he's a dude who's very focused on what he likes building, and he'll say some things that'll get on some hot water. I actually think he probably does party from time to time. I don't think this is like, I did a poll on my Instagram. I was like, Elon should be drug-free, or he should, he's a horrible role model for individuals, or let Elon be Elon. It was like 98%, just let Elon do Elon.
Yeah.
So spending time with Elon, the richest man in the world, major voice, all these things are coming at him, X, media, drug use, anti-Semitic. Just what's your take on Elon? What's his brand? And what's your vision of him for the future?
Yeah. Wow. I like him. And he's someone I've admired and respected for at least 15 plus years. Like, since I've been aware of him and all the things that he's doing, I've always found him to be inspirational. And then after meeting him, or during meeting him, something that was just cool is when you meet someone who is that successful in various areas and endeavors and so on, I think it's very cool and inspiring when he was just humble and friendly. He seemed as happy to meet me as I was as happy to meet him. We just sat down, we had a conversation just like we're having now, friendly, fun, cracking jokes, just being normal. Because, I think one thing that's weird, and I've noticed this now to an extent, right? I have a tiny, tiny fraction of the level of fame or success that Elon Musk does. And I was just thinking about the concept of sort of fame and celebrity the other day. And I think the reason why a lot of celebrities all throughout history go crazy is because I think the more famous you become, the fewer and fewer people treat you like a human. And you see that with someone like Elon, like hundreds of millions, probably billions of people know who Elon Musk is. And how many people treat Elon like a normal human being? Like, it's probably going to be like his children and, his mom, like some family members and some close friends. Everyone else, for good or worse, right? Whether they're treating you like a demigod or they're treating you like you're just this caricature. You're not really a human. You're just like a thing. I can say whatever I want. I can do, like, you see some of the negative comments, directed at someone, like, it's like you're forgetting that this guy is a human being. You're
Even though he's trying to take everybody to outer space, another colony out there, he's actually still human.
Yeah, and you see this with actors, you see it with athletes, you see it with, like it doesn't matter. I think that's something that can drive a lot of people crazy. But look, I've got nothing bad to say about the man. I'm honored that he was even happy to come on my pod. He's got a lot of other things to do than to come on my on my podcast and to be chatting to me in DMs and whatever it is. One thing I like about Elon in particular is that he's very pro-human. He is pro-human. Not everyone in the billionaire class, and what we've talked about, the whole WEF. Yeah. You've got people pushing, there's too many human beings in the world, and we need to reduce the number, to 500 million, and so on. You've got that mindset, and then you've got Elon, who's like the biggest threat to humanity is people are not having enough babies. We need more families. We need more children. We need more, right? Like, that's good. And if you think of the amount of wealth and influence and power he has, I'm glad, if it has to be in the hands of a human being, I'm quite glad that it is someone like Elon Musk, because if you gave a lot of other people hundreds of billions of dollars and that level of power and promise, they do some really nasty stuff with it. So the man is not perfect. Nobody is perfect. I had big questions for him about Neuralink, because I have long-term concerns about where that technology could go, and I'm still concerned about it. But I think that in terms of his actual aims and desires and where he would like to see humanity and civilization go, and his actions that are confirming that, he's not just talking it. He's sending these rockets out into space. He's trying to get to Mars. He's doing a lot. And I think it's good in a society to have heroes. I don't know why there's this obsession with just trying to tear down and destroy every man who is doing great things. I think I wasn't around historically, but maybe it's not a new thing, man.
I think it's very important. Patrick and I talk about all this all the time. We're not making enough heroes. We're lacking the hero-making machine. I think we need to stop making politicians heroes and making business leaders and entrepreneurs and difference makers those heroes. And I'm full agreement that I think Elon is one of those.
Agreed.
Last question.
Let's go.
This is what I call the happy ending.
Okay.
Right? So you've been pretty. What I like about you is I can go any different direction here. Typically, I stay in my lane of money and dating, but I'm branching out, because on PBD Podcast we talk about all this. But they say the niches are the riches are in the niches, but I'm branching out on my own. But let me bring it back to what my core message is on men need to be men, and men need to be the best version of themselves, and that's how women will benefit, and that's what society will benefit. But there's a lot going on with young men these days, and that's where I want to end this happy ending with. You've given quotes like, the breakdown of family, loss of religion, changes in tech are the cause of young people's confusion towards their gender. Clearly, that's what's going on there. We talked about that. You've also given another take on basically what it's like to be a man. Great take.
I don't even remember this. I tweet so much.
It wasn't even a tweet. It was an interview.
Okay, cool.
And ultimately, this is a message for the young men out there. You said, boys are being told to man up, but masculinity is also toxic, right? You've also said that we need masculinity, but masculinity doesn't really exist because gender is a social construct, right? But also women are strong and independent, but don't need no man. But also women are not actually that strong, and they don't necessarily need to be independent, and they don't need a man. So there's so much confusion out there these days, and I think traditional gender roles are basically at an all-time low, especially in the West. But I'm not here to solve everybody's problems. But for the young men out there, what advice do you have for men in today's society with all the gender stuff going on, the political stuff that's going on, and the chaotic stuff that's going on, and people trying to make money in social media, and arguably the biggest downfall of young men and young women these days are the algorithms all there. They're just stuck on their phones all day. We're kind of just putting all this nonsense together and try to give men a optimistic view. What's your message for young men out there in the world today?
Wow, man, this is huge. The first thing is that if you are a man, nothing good is going to come to you beyond what you're born with unless you make it happen. Women can live a more passive life, and good things and opportunities come to them. As a man, it's very much choose your own adventure, create your own character. I think this is why guys even like video games so much. You create your own character. You pick your adventure.
Your fighter,
exactly, exactly. Not just choose your fighter, like create your fighter. Right. And so what I would say is kind of put the blinders on a little bit. Don't fret so much about all of the statistics and where society and culture and politics and men and women and dating and all of these things are going. There's 8 billion people in the world. You don't have to date all of them. You don't have to marry all of them. You don't have to reproduce with all of them. So it could be, I think it's absolutely true that there are fewer marriageable women and fewer marriageable men in both of our countries now than there were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I think it's been talked to ad infinitum. But, and here's the big message of hope, assuming you want to have a family one day, and most people do, so I'm going to talk to the average, you only need to find one. You don't need all the millions of women to like you and all the millions of men. Like, you need to find one person.
They call it
so
one.
Exactly. So it could be true that the dating market is generally garbage and Tinder is generally garbage and feminism has, messed up millions of young women and this is going on and that's going on. All of that can be true. But if you get your own life in order, get yourself in the gym, get in good physical shape. You don't need to be a pro bodybuilder or athlete. Get yourself in decent physical shape. Be interesting, have some stories, have achieved something, work on your finances, get a job, start a business, like build yourself up, get good at communicating, listening, do some reading, get good at talking, develop your sense of home. Just continue to develop yourself and then simply put yourself in situations where there are opportunities, where whatever opportunities may mean to you. And over the course of time, you will find that people are drawn to you. Both men and women will be, if you are a high quality, high value individual, it's a bit of a weird term, but not just the opposite sex will be drawn to you, like other men will be drawn to you. They'll be like, hey, like, I like this guy. I want to hang out with him. I want to follow him. We've been sitting here talking about Elon Musk and talking about, like, you're drawn to these people because you're like, hey, like, I see what this guy's doing and it's inspirational and it's cool. So, become that to some level. You don't need to fly to the highest level. You don't need to become a multi-billionaire or a celebrity or this or that, but just, become that guy, become a decent person, be useful to your fellow human beings, create something. And that's really, this is not like, it's not an immediate thing, but we all know things that we can, Lord knows, we've all got things that we can improve on. And I often tell people, if you're not sure where to start, if you're really, really confused, start by getting yourself in great shape.
I fully agree.
Start by getting yourself in great shape, because if you can do that, and it's harder to do than you probably think, if you can do that and you can be consistent with it, you can take that same mindset, that same persistence, that same everything that it took you to go from the before to the after. If you apply that to any other aspect of life, you will attain some level of success in it, whether that is a podcast or a YouTube channel, or it's starting a business, or it's in your 9-to-5 job, or it's in the dating and relationship markets, whatever it is, you just apply that same thing and you will be all right.
Yeah, I think it's going to take time to become that dude.
Yeah.
It could take you 10 years, it could take you 20 years, but over time, you will become that dude. I often say that for a life as a man, it's almost like a traffic light. You start off as red, you got to get it to yellow, and you got to get it up to green. But it's going to take you some time to go from red to yellow to green. But then eventually, could take you a little while.
Yeah.
Eventually, you become that dude.
And I'll tell you what else. I think that dude is a process. It's not just like a final position.
No.
Right?
Constantly evolving.
Exactly. By being on that journey, other people will support you. People think that if you go to the gym and you're a beginner, or you're like obese, or you're super skinny or whatever, people are like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym. People are going to laugh at me. They're going to make... That's extremely rare. What will generally happen is people see you in the process of self-improvement and they want to support you, right? They want to support you. They see, oh, like I'm doing this. Hey, this guy's trying. I've used the analogy before that if you're in, if your car breaks down and you just sit there in the car and you just wait, no one is going to come out and help you. If you get out and you start pushing and people see, oh, this guy's broken down on the side and he's pushing, what happens? Other people are going to,
let's go help this guy out.
So take that analogy and apply it to your life, you'll be surprised by just how many good people there are around you and how supportive people can be. People who are successful in any area do like to help other people. They like to give advice. They like to mentor. They like to do all of that. So don't assume that, the battle might begin by yourself.
Yeah.
But once you get that thing moving, you'll find that other people want to come.
1,000,000%. What's the famous African proverb? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go as a team. So, Zuby, you are that dude.
My man, I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you, bro. Tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, you can find me on all social media at Zuby Music. That is Zuby Music. And you can find my music, my podcast, just on whatever platform you use. Search for Zuby, Zuby. Very easy to find. I'm on everything.
Zuby, thank you for being on the SOSCAST of Valuetainment. Go ahead and give him a follow right there. See you guys later. Whoa. If you like that one, click right here to watch the full SOSCAST. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
Talk is money, honey. All we talk is money. All we talk is money. It's like bees to the honey.